pod bay doors, please, Hal.
And now back to 1943's fast-talking High Trousers.
Well, isn't this a fine song and dance?
What are you getting so hot about?
Keep your shirt on.
Where do you get off making remarks like that?
Supposing I say you're a lunkhead.
Well, I ain't much for supposing.
Well, supposing you were.
Well, maybe I'm through supposing and I'm fixed to start figuring.
Horseradish.
Well, aren't you a pocket full of firecrackers?
Oh, yeah? You got something to say about it?
I'll say plenty.
The pod bay doors are open. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here, as always, with my brain, my partner in crime, Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com. Jerry, how you doing?
So where are you eating lunch these days?
You know where I eat lunch.
Yeah, I do.
We are talking about writer-director Rian Johnson's feature debut, Brick, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt in one of the best roles he's ever had.
And a movie that you really have to, either you get it or you don't.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Let me tell you something. This is one of those movies where you sit there and you, it takes you a minute to get into it because, first of all, first observation, this movie is very, very 2005.
Yeah.
You can smell it.
Well, because of the lack of cell phones, there's still payphones.
I don't think so, because payphones went out in like 2002.
No, but they use payphones all the way through this, though.
But it's a little strange. What it is it's Southern California, modern day Southern California, 2005, mixed with dialogue that sounds like Raymond Chandler
from
Dashiell Hammett.
30s hard-boiled detective novels.
It's a little off-putting at first.
Well, see, I love it right from the start, but that's kind of one of my favorite genres of literature and subgenres or styles of film. So I got right into it.
Wasn't this around the time or after when they were taking literary classics and modernizing them? Like,
well, they'd been doing that for a long time, but yes, this was maybe 6 or 7 years after 10 Things I Hate About You, which Gordon-Levitt was also in.
Yeah. They did the same thing with Hamlet. They did the same thing with, yeah.
Yeah, it was all happening in the early 2000s or so. But the way Rian Johnson put this together is he did not write it out as a script first.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote it out in block prose.
Yeah.
He wrote it into a story, and then he adapted his own unpublished, unseen story into a screenplay. And I just the talent of people that are in this, like I said, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but there's also Noah Segan, Megan Good in an early role, Emily DeRaven when she was kind of at the peak of her popularity because she was on Lost, had just started the year before. Lucas Haas, Richard Roundtree is the vice principal, which
Shaft.
I never get tired of seeing.
I can't remember, is that Shaft?
It is. It very much is. I love how intricate this is, and how this kid is somehow this like hard-boiled detective at like 15. Like, or 16 or 17 or however old he is. I'm guessing he's probably a sophomore or senior, or a junior or senior, but he has this past of like getting people arrested for messing up the school and stuff like that. Like,
well, and it's first of all, it's a murder mystery.
Yeah.
The thing is, it begins. There's a lot of this movie that feels like you're reading it, like
Yeah.
you're reading it out of a book.
Yeah.
I mean, it begins on a note that you would read in a book.
Yeah.
He's standing over a body in a drain ditch,
Right.
and it goes from there. But the thing is, and if you've seen Rian Johnson's films, even Star Wars, if you've seen Rian Johnson's films, this, Looper, Knives Out, you know that when he starts the film, when he starts his story, you don't know where it's going.
No, you never ever do.
Writes such a beautiful labyrinth
Mm-hmm.
of characters and ideas and twists and turns that you can't spoil the ending even if you want to.
Right. He's one of the smartest writers in film
He is.
today. Right up there with.
And he will continue to be if they'll leave him alone.
Yeah, exactly. I love, he's obviously responsible for Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which was on my top 10 of the decade, last decade list.
And last year did Knives Out.
Yes, and he's, as a result, the vocal split with hating the people who hate Last Jedi went and saw Knives Out, and they're like, wait a minute, the same guy did this, but Knives Out is good. It's like, yeah, all of his movies are good. Even The Brothers Bloom, which is probably the least of his films, is still pretty fun.
It's all right. It's not terrible.
Right, exactly.
I'm not-
It's a distinctive sophomore attempt.
It's fine.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it's fun.
I don't. I'm looking forward to what he does.
Me too.
Unfortunately, I have a feeling that as time goes on, he gets more work. He's gonna have less agency in his work. Because I mean, what's he got next? Knives Out 2?
Right, but
I don't need a Knives Out 2.
No, he wanted to do it. Somebody tweeted, I want a sequel, a series of Knives Out films where Daniel Craig does a different accent in each one.
Like next time he has a Russian accent.
Yeah, right. And Rian Johnson tweeted back to them, "Can I tell you that I actually thought about that?"
He's the same guy. Just
Yeah. And so he actively, he's like, I have a story for Knives Out too, keeping that one detective and just moving it on to another case. He's like, yeah, I've already got ideas for sequels.
Mhm.
So he's the one that's originating that idea, which
Yeah.
I'm okay with. I'm really eager to see when they finally let him back into Lucasfilm what his Star Wars trilogy is going to be like.
does he have one? I thought it was.
No, he still says we're still talking. It's still on. We just don't have time, dates or anything. But they are still telling him that it's on, and he is.
See, I
still telling them.
thought he had it, and then they pulled it away, and then he had it, and then they pulled it away.
As far as I know, and everything that he's said, he's still involved.
Well, I mean, they keep changing because now they want to go to Disney Plus and all this.
They don't know what they're doing, and they have a new CEO, so
Yeah.
or a new president or whatever. So
Yeah, Bob Iger's gone.
yeah. But anyway,
But this movie, I'm going to tell you, I have read Raymond Chandler and I've read Dashiell Hammett.
Dashiell Hammett's my favorite author.
I like Dashiell Hammett a lot better because
too.
Dashiell Hammett can tell a story. Raymond Chandler's all style.
Yeah, Dashiell Hammett actually knows where his story is going, whereas Raymond Chandler just kind of writes until he runs out of things to say.
Right.
But having said that, that sounds like it's a knock on Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler's a damn good author. But
He is, but he writes the same story over and over again.
Yeah,
Or
pretty
wrote
much.
the same
And
story
he always would throw in a twist at the end that completely changes anything anybody was thinking about.
It's a surprise ending. It'll be a surprise ending, but then when you think back through the story logically, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense.
Right, exactly. He'll throw something in to throw people off, or there's this one piece of evidence that doesn't come in until like the last chapter.
Yeah.
And there is no way that anybody could have solved it without that, but Marlowe somehow already knew it. You know, it's interesting the way that he did that, and he tried to keep things interesting by twisting it up. This is very much a Chandler versus Hammett, I think.
Can we talk about how much Joseph Gordon-Levitt gets his ass handed to him in this movie? I mean, and the body just is. I mean, by the end of it, he's just.
He's got bloody marks and bruises and everything, and that actually follows in the grand tradition of the hard-boiled detective.
I thought of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Indiana Jones too. Yeah,
especially in Raiders, where he just gets the crap beat out of him constantly.
Yeah, and nobody takes a punch like Harrison Ford.
Nobody. I thought of that, and then I was thinking, why didn't Joseph Gordon-Levitt? Why didn't you put him in Crystal Skull?
Right.
You know, I was like, that would have been perfect. You know, because well, Shia LaBeouf was of the moment, so.
Yeah, and you know, Shia LaBeouf is doing much better for himself now.
Yeah, he's not the hot mess that he was 5 years ago.
Right. No.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt has always been
good.
A heck of it. And like an actor we talked about last week, Woody Harrelson, also started in a sitcom.
Yes, Third Rock from the Sun.
Right. As a little kid. He was a cute little kid.
Yeah, he was.
And he was the old man.
12? Yeah. He was a young kid. He's about my age, I think.
Mm-hmm. He's 39.
Okay, so he is my age.
Yeah,
so I remember him from that, and I liked him on that a lot. Mm-hmm. And then I saw that he was in this. This isn't his first feature film, but it's one of his first.
No, did you ever see The Lookout?
Yes.
That's his best performance.
That is a hell of a picture.
And he rescued, I'm sorry, but he rescued that Dark Knight. He rescued that movie.
Dark Knight Rises, yeah.
I almost wanted them to give him a Robin movie.
Yeah.
Or a Nightwing movie.
Or something.
But he's so good in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he works a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He works a lot. But he's good here.
I just want to know, at what point does he turn into Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Because I don't see it, and he should be looking like that by now, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, he gets beat up as much as John McClane.
He does. I mean, so the basic crux of this
is... turning into Bruce Willis is about like Josh Radnor turning into Bob Saget.
Yeah.
On How I Met Your Mother.
Although I still don't know when that's supposed to happen, because they're already adults when this is all playing out. The hell does he make his transition to Bob Saget? Anyway, I never actually watched the show, so I can't really say too much about it. But the whole thing of this is like a beautiful kind of you don't, like you said, you don't know where it's going to go. It's like an iceberg. You see the top of it, and then when you start going down, so much starts to come out. Like he just wants to make sure that his ex-girlfriend is okay.
I wasn't really interested in the plot itself. I was just interested in what was happening to him while he got there. The funniest thing that happened to me while I was watching, I saw this a year ago. The funniest thing that happened to me while I was watching it was I was sitting there, and they keep talking about the pen, mm-hmm. the pen. And it's this downward spiral to where he gets to the pin, and the pin is this big wig
He's a drug kingpin in this
who lives with
this
his mother.
little suburban town who lives in it with his mother and who dotes on his crew.
Well, you see him from behind the first time you see him when Gordon-Levitt goes in, and you see him from behind. He's wearing a cape, and he turns around, and it's Lucas Haas, and I'm like, it's a little boy from Witness.
It's Lucas Haas. Not only is it Lucas Haas, he turns around. He's not in a swivel chair.
No.
He's just in a regular chair without wheels, without anything. He just kind of picks himself up and turns himself around. It's so inelegant.
Dressed like he's trying to be Dracula.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, and he doesn't. He's grown up, but he doesn't look much different than he did in Witness.
Right? No, he's clearly in his like maybe very very early 20s, and
I was going to say he's probably in his late 20s because he's grown up. He
might be, yeah.
Yeah, he just. He is the most non-threatening guy.
yeah, that's extremely true. He is
and
non-threatening.
He's got this guy, this bulldog,
Tug,
who I love it when Levitt goes up and he asks him, he doesn't ask him. He says, "I want to see the pin." And the guy, well, he's going to break his window with a giant piece of concrete.
Yeah.
And he's just standing there with it over his head, and he sees him. I was reminded of Monty Python, when Lancelot is running. Because you see him, and then you look back, and he's marching toward the car. And then you see him, and he's marching toward the car. And then you see him, and he's marching toward the car.
Yeah.
And he just puts the piece of concrete down. And he walks up and just punches him in the face.
Yeah.
And there's this great shot. He gets in the car, and he's about to drive off. And you just see Levitt's hand.
Yeah.
I want to see the pin. That is a great scene.
Yeah, there's a lot
Because he throws something in his car, and he stops.
Yeah.
He doesn't get out. He just stops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the dynamic between, and I love I just love the social structure that is in place that is so familiar that but yet it's also so unique to this world that it's unfamiliar. Like he goes in and sees I guess an ex-girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Megan Good, who's an I guess an impresario in the drama club.
Yeah.
And so it's and the conversations that he has with her, like she's some manipulative,
Yeah.
kind of bad girl, and then he gets in with
Well, it's the tradition.
yeah, well, yeah,
Women are dangerous.
right.
Women are more dangerous than shotguns.
But it's even more iterated with Nora Zeheitner.
Mm-hmm.
She is the femme fatale. She is.
Yeah.
You don't know if she is helping him or hurting him, or both, or doing something out of kindness, or she sees an angle because she's with the pin and she's with Tug and she's kind of going to him and she's going to she's like all around, and you don't really know what her deal is. Her character's name is Laura, right?
Right.
So it's just kind of amazing that and he just kind of barrels through.
Yeah.
He works things out. He's a smart kid, but he is very, very much like where the story is Chandler. he is more like the Continental Op in Hammett. He just kind of puts his head down, barrels forward, finds the clues, doesn't stop, and just kind of rams his head through until he's done.
Right.
Which is exactly what the Continental Op does. Things like Red Harvest and others that Hammett wrote with him, who was actually based on Hammett himself, who used to be Pinkerton guard in the Pinkerton detective in the 20s. It's just, and could we talk about his friend Brian Brain?
Yeah.
Oh, the guy in the chair.
It's his.
It's his guy in the chair.
It's his information.
Right, he's
guy.
he's the coordinator. He's the one that sets up the meetings. He's the one that does the research and gets the information. He's the he's the Effie to his Sam Spade.
Yeah.
And, I love him too. He's such a good character.
Yeah.
So the story kind of, to get your bearings on this, folks. I apologize. We're talking about everything.
The story ultimately, I'm going to tell you the truth. The story ultimately doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
This movie is about style. It's not about plot.
But the
It's
plot
about-
is still very good.
This plot is good, but it's just that you're more interested in what's going on with the plot and with the dialogue and with the characters.
Oh yeah.
And individual moments. The plot is almost kind of lays underneath that, and that's not a bad thing.
No, it's really one of the better ways to tell a story. It's kind of like what he did with Knives Out. Is that it's dazzling through its wordplay, but the story underneath, the actual plot and figuring out everything that went on, is really, really entertaining to watch, especially if you watch it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, you look at you hear the dialogue, and you see the style that he shot it in. The more you watch it, the more the world feels very lived in, and the plot, the story arc actually kind of matters.
Mm-hmm.
But if it wasn't there, you know that there would still be some way that he would have gotten himself mixed up in all this trouble.
Mm-hmm.
His ex-girlfriend, played by Emily DeRaven, calls him in a panic, saying that she got into trouble. Something about a brick and the pin, and Tug is going to come and kill her, and she was all scared and everything. And then he finds her body in a
drainage ditch.
And he hides the body because he doesn't want. He wants to be able to figure it out for himself. He doesn't want
the cops in on it.
Right. No bulls.
Right.
And the way it was a brick of what, cocaine?
It was a brick of cocaine, a brick of heroin.
Brick of heroin, that's what it was. And a very large
Street value
amount.
could probably pay off my house.
That brick that
Yeah.
could pay off your house and buy your entire neighborhood. That was a couple
also-
$1 million worth of.
And also get you 25 to...
Wow.
yeah.
I
It
mean,
also
yeah,
gets
there's always that.
Also get you a mandatory 25. And,
Yeah, well,
into joint.
it is what it is. But it's hard to talk about this movie without the plot, but yet the plot is
That's
also
where I
not-
was. I was sitting there. I was trying to think of, what are we going to talk about with this movie? And I thought, well, this is, I can only really discuss the style because the story is so. The story is it's there, but it's not the point.
Right, and it's so very Chandler-esque. Like when you finally find out exactly why Emily DeRaven was killed,
Mhm.
which was she was pregnant with she was with somebody after she was with Brandon,
Mhm.
and then I guess somebody else, and she found out. I guess it was Tug found out she was pregnant and killed her.
Mhm.
Got jealous because it wasn't his, or it might have been. Not really sure, but and it had nothing to do with the drugs. It had nothing to do with any.
We're all red herrings.
Right. It had nothing to do with anything that he's been investigating. Yet he still manages to bring down a major drug operation in this.
This really, I'm going to say this. One of my favorite books of all time, ever, is The Maltese Falcon.
Mine too.
And that story, the Maltese Falcon itself is like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Right.
It is effectively a blind alley.
Yeah. Who cares?
Who cares? A lot of what goes on in this movie is a blind alley. The murder mystery effectively is a blind alley.
Right.
Because it's not really connected. Because you're more interested in how he gets there
Right. Right.
than
It
what
has-
actually.
The murder mystery has the same players as the drug mystery,
Right.
but they're not actually related to each other.
Right.
Which is it's really kind of brilliant because he gets to investigate. We get to see him digging into like 6 different things at once that are all connected but not reliant on each other for one thing to happen. And
You know, the scene that made me laugh in this movie is when he meets with the vice principal.
yeah.
Because it's played so much like the cop who's getting chewed out by the boss.
Right. It's the whole, give me your badge and gun, and you're on 2
Give me
weeks
5
suspension.
days.
Yeah.
Give me 5 days.
Yeah.
And I can solve this. And it's very much. I had to laugh at that because that was so funny.
It's so funny. The whole
And the style of that scene is great too because they do all these upward angles
mhm.
when you're looking at the characters, and it's a student talking to his vice principal.
Yeah.
Okay, a student talking to his vice principal is going to be the most uninteresting conversation you've ever heard in your life.
However,
However, in this movie, and he's talking to Richard Roundtree, so I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
he's talking to Shaft.
Yeah. I mean, but the dialogue is just, who is this? I won't waste your time. You don't know me. I know everyone, and I have all the time in the world. Ah, the folly of youth.
What is
Throw
that
in-
scene?
Oh, I love it when he's talking to the potheads in the back, trying to find.
Oh, the drug addicts? Yeah, I was just
yeah,
about to say that. Yeah.
And they're gonna punch him. Throw one at me if you want, hash head. I've got all 5 senses, and I slept last night. That puts me 6 up on the lot of you. Oh, just damn. Do you trust me now? Less than when I didn't trust you before. I mean, this is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's whew. Yeah, I can't talk about how good this. Okay, yeah. Here's the assistant VP Gary Truman,
Yeah.
and he's the vice principal in charge of discipline, which would also be the truancy.
Yeah.
You've helped this office out before. No, I gave you Jer to see him eaten, not to see you fed.
Yeah.
Fine, and very well put. Accelerated English, Mrs. Kasperick. Tough teacher, tough but fair.
Yeah.
I can't get over just how intelligent this movie is.
Yeah.
And it's such an intricate, well laid out story that you just, like you said, with all of his pictures, you just don't know where this is going to go, and every time it goes somewhere new, it's delightful.
Yeah.
In sometimes a very terrifying way, but just the character of Tug, I think, is probably one of the most surprising characters in the movie.
Yeah. Because he's this bulldog. He's this big guy, fist clenched, kind of
Wife beater and a beanie type.
Right. Driving around in a Mustang?
Yeah.
And never drives less than 50 miles an hour.
Right.
And he's the most surprising character in the movie.
Right, because he's the muscle, and you don't expect much from him, and then when Brandon finally kind of levels with him and they get on the same page, he is a much more introspective character than he's than anybody's ever led to believe throughout up until that point. And you really get the notion that maybe Tug could take over the Pins operation.
Easily.
Right, but because he's such a loose cannon and quick to fight, kill, he kills a couple people in this, that he wouldn't be a very good leader. He'd be Sonny Corleone.
Yeah.
And it's surprising that he doesn't meet his end like Sonny Corleone. But we don't know what happens after this.
Right.
Part of me always wanted like a Brick 2, but never wanted it to be made. Like I want it in theory because
It's
I
better
want
to
these
have
characters. But
it's better to have the sequel in your head.
yeah. It's I want these characters to come back and to see Brandon years later, but at the same time, this movie is done. The stories are done. The characters are done. It's perfectly put together. It's perfectly ended. Oh my God!
And it is, as you say, hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about in terms of. You try to explain it to people. Now, this is one of those movies that when people see it, they want other people to see it.
Yeah.
But they can't explain it because when you start explaining it, it sounds stupid.
It does.
It's like it's like anytime I ever tried to tell somebody to see It Follows, and I start talking about the plot, and I'm like, I'm making this sound like the stupidest movie ever made.
Well, yeah, I mean, but when you say, it's like a film noir detective story, hard-boiled detective story set in a high school
In Southern California.
It's like, what?
You're thinking a bunch of hipsters, with little coffee cups and
Yeah, but no.
coffee cups and fish tacos and things like that.
These
You're
are
just like,
really tough kids.
yeah,
Like this is not this isn't Bel Air. This
yeah,
this is,
yeah. This ain't Bel Air. This ain't Beverly Hills.
Yeah, this is like South Central.
Right.
This is, but it still has.
Well, this is the far-flung suburbs.
Right.
It would be the kind of neighborhood I live in. But slightly less economic.
Right.
But when you see these kids and you're thinking there's a certain way that you expect them to talk, and the sort of dreamy way that kids sometimes talk to each other, it's not there.
It's not there at all. This is all dead-faced, straight ahead. I'm going to say what I need to say, and you're going to tell me what I need to hear, and then we're done.
Here's what I kept thinking, because he's the first one you hear speaking in the movie, and he talks like Sam Spade, or he talks like a Raymond Chandler. Here's what I thought was going to happen. I thought he talks like that, and nobody else does.
Right, that he's the only one that talks like that, but no.
And everybody's looking, why are you talking like that?
It would be like there was an episode of Phineas and Ferb where they decided that they were going to do a mystery. They were going to be private detectives for a day, and they walked around. They were talking like that, and they were in black and white.
Yeah.
They made everything around them black and white, but everything else was in color. Like if people weren't playing along, they came in and they were in color, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And just they would go around. They were like kind of dragnet, kind of just the facts, kind of. So yeah, it was. I kind of expected that, but then when everybody else speaks like that, it's like, where the hell are they?
Yeah.
Like, no one ever
like that?
no one ever talked like that. Even back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
They talked like that in the movies and in the books, but real people did not ever talk like this.
Yeah, like the sort of Mickey Spillane dialogue,
Yeah.
The bullets went in like periods and blood welled out like commas,
Right. Or there's just that's a really vivid image.
Yeah.
But yeah, like why don't you take a powder, or
Yeah.
it's all this just colloquialism from 40s detective movies just transplanted into 21st century.
That's why when we started this show 2 years ago, one of the first movies you jumped on was Maltese Falcon.
Yep.
I mean, one of the first. That's like in one of the first 5 episodes we ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I do. I get it. I understand exactly why, because it doesn't, the plot does not matter. It's the way, it's the style of getting there. It's the dialogue and the manner of the whole film.
Right.
And the same thing here.
It's how much the plot matters to the characters, not to the audience.
I always love I love the cliches, or the you can always when somebody gets drunk, you can always solve it with a jolt of black coffee.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always love that.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
It's 3 sheets to the wind. I'll make us some black coffee.
Yeah.
But then again, the coffee they had back in the 40s, it would wake me up.
It would make me sick. That was when Americans only like knew about like freeze dried Folgers and Maxwell House. That was the only kind of coffee chock full of nuts. They didn't have like they did coming in and grinding your own beans and stuff like that. It was all just percolator processed crap.
And you cooked it in a pot on the stove.
Yeah, or a percolator.
Or percolator.
Which,
yeah.
I don't know if I know you don't really drink coffee, but if you've ever had percolated coffee,
I've smelled it.
it smells amazing. It tastes terrible.
My grandmother used to make percolated coffee, and the way it makes your house smell, there's no other smell like it.
No, it's a wonderful smell. If it were just like an aerosol, if it was just like an air freshener, fine. If I didn't have to drink it after.
Yeah.
But even when I've used really good beans in a percolator, it still doesn't come out good.
Whenever I smell that coffee, it takes me back to my grandmother's house. It does, because I remember that in the morning. It was that little pot with the thing on top, and it was like it made this wonderful smell. And I never had any interest in drinking coffee at all.
I drink far too much of it. My mother-in-law actually, when she lived with us, bought an electric percolator. So I ended up drinking percolator coffee for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It might actually still be in the house. I'm not sure.
So one of the funniest sight gags ever. One of the funniest sight gags ever was Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, where Steve Martin is making the coffee and he's got the bag and he keeps He gets pork in the pot and it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I love these stories. I love this, and it's interesting that that genre really only came out. It came out of the post World War II. That's when
Yeah.
it really hit.
Yeah, yeah.
It existed before then, but it really came out of that film noir.
Right, right. Because the books, Chandler, Spillane, Carver, Hammett, all of them, they started writing in the mid to late 20s.
Right.
Their books started coming out way back then. So they were kind of like staples in literary circles for, 10, 15 years before the first one of those kind of movies ever even got made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they'd done detective procedurals in the 30s
Mm-hmm.
to kind of match the gangster pictures.
Yeah, and most gangster pictures at the time were like it was cop versus criminal.
Right. And this was the Maltese Falcon was really the first one of these to delve into, not having the black and white, this guy's the criminal and this guy's the good guy.
Yeah.
It's like kind of everybody's a criminal and everybody could kind of be a good guy.
And the guy, the main character, Sam Spade, is willing to do things that are decidedly unheroic.
Right, they are. Yeah, he just wants to get the job done. He doesn't really
Right.
care what he has to do it.
Hmm.
People were not used to that.
Right. This is very neo-noir. Brick
Right.
is very neo-noir.
Right, the morally gray protagonist, the just the nth level of seediness that is going on in this school, in this town.
I found it a very hard movie to get my feet into initially because the dialogue is so separated from what you're looking at.
It's so stylized.
Right.
And
But the film is not. But the film itself is not.
no, visually it is. I think that's part of the brilliance of the look of it. Is
It
that
looks like an independent film from the early 2000s.
Well, yeah, but it also it has an it's not drab. It's a very realistic look with very unrealistic words.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we were saying about the like when they put Ethan Hawke in Hamlet and made it contemporary, but not the dialogue.
Ethan Hawke wasn't the problem with that movie. Bill Murray was the problem with that movie.
Well, there wasn't one single problem with the movie.
Well, when you had one movie based on Shakespeare that was set to contemporary times, that was kind of an inventive idea. When you had two or three, okay. When you had the 10th or 11th film that sets Shakespeare in modern times, the gimmick starts to wear out.
Right, and it all depends on how you do it too, because Kurosawa adapted Shakespeare into two feudal Japanese stories with Ron and Throne of Blood, did King Lear and Macbeth, but also did a jazzy riff on Hamlet in The Bad Sleep Well, which was an, at the time, contemporary, 1960s, kind of drama.
Mhm.
That he really, really, really loosely adapted Hamlet into.
Yeah.
So when you get things like that, or even hell, The Lion King is Hamlet basically.
Yeah.
Reimagined into a different kind of setting. So when it's done properly, and when you don't try to bring the Shakespearean language, if you just bring the story,
hmm
it works a lot better in modern dress.
Right.
But then there's also Richard III, which is set, in the late 1800s, or the late 1700s, and they keep the language. It's just a beautiful. I mean, that's just a beautiful.
I don't mind the transplants when they try to be clever with it. One of my favorites, I remember, and it wasn't a great movie, but I remember there was Richard III
Yeah.
with Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen.
And it was set during World War II.
Yeah. That's
And
a
it's
hell of a
like
picture.
he's doing Now is the Winter of Our Discontent while he's standing in a urinal.
Yeah.
And he's in My Kingdom for a Horse while his Jeep is stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I love it when they can be clever with it. That Romeo and Juliet movie gave me a headache.
Oh, I can't
The one
stand.
with DiCaprio.
I
That movie
can't-
gave me a headache.
I'm not a particularly big fan of Baz Luhrmann.
I'm not either.
I love Strictly Ballroom.
Mhm.
I am on the slightly more favorable side of Great Gatsby. Not very far over into the positive realm, but
Yeah.
far enough to say that I would recommend it to people who like the book, but not love the book. But Luhrmann's style, he's all candy. He's all. I hate Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, it's
Hated
so
Moulin Rouge.
kinetic and so I don't have the merry-go-round is going so fast that I have a very difficult time getting on it.
Right.
And I can't I can't get my feet in it. I can't get a hold of it.
Right. The only good thing about the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet is that we get that scene in Hot Fuzz where they're putting Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet on the stage,
Yeah.
and it's horrible.
Yeah. I think Roger Ebert had the best review of Romeo and Juliet. He said, the dialogue, half of it they whisper, half of it they shout, and never once do they ever stop to actually listen to what they're saying. It's a music video, and it just drove me crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
Anyway,
like that movie at all. Anyway.
that might be a candidate at some point for Turkey Month.
Oh God! Don't make me watch that again. Oh. I love Romeo and Juliet so much. I'd rather talk about Shakespeare in Love.
I do like Shakespeare in Love.
Romeo and Ethel the Pirate's Daughter. I love that movie because I love. Whatever happened to Joseph Fiennes?
Right?
God, it was like
he does
he was-
television and stuff. He's still active. He's just not.
I expected that movie. After that movie, I expected him to be a big star, and he's so good in that as the young Will Shakespeare.
Yeah.
One thing I love about that movie, one of my favorite scenes, is when he's walking by. He's on his way somewhere, and he walks by, and he hears a town crier, "A plague on both the houses!" And he's thinking about it. And he like takes that line. I love that scene.
Oh wow.
See, I don't mind bending the genre. I don't mind bending the language. It's just it has to be done a certain way.
Right.
It has to be done with some consideration. You can't just throw that dialogue at the screen and expect it to work.
Right. Oh, by the way, Joseph Fiennes is in The Handmaid's Tale currently.
Okay.
On Hulu, and he's been around.
The last thing I remember him in was Flash Forward, and that's been a
while.
decade.
That's been a while. I looked him up, and he's been on American Horror Story too. He has
my problem with American Horror
British
Story is
name. Go ahead.
my problem with American Horror Story is I get about halfway through it. I get about halfway through the season, then I drop out because I just get bored.
I have never watched a single episode of that. Listen to this. I know we'll get back to Brick in just a half a second here, but I want to say Joseph Fiennes has the most British name I have ever seen in my entire life. Joseph Alberic Twistleton Wickham Fiennes. Twistleton Wycombe Fiennes. Yes, that's his actual last name. Which means that Rafe is also Rafe Twistleton Wickham Fiennes.
Oh my God!
Born in Salisbury, Wiltshire,
You know what I love? I love it when you look up
England.
where an English actor is from,
Yes.
and it's like Avon upon Surrey. You know?
I love English town names.
Yeah.
And the fact that they name their houses and everybody knows the names of the houses and
Yeah.
like, I just love that idea. It's such a
Whistleton upon Wiltshire.
right.
If they're not born in London.
Right. My hometown actually has a sister city in England. I grew up in a little town called Berwick, and we had a sister city over in England called Berwick upon Tweed.
Yeah.
Where we have done exchanges. They have come over here, we've gone over there. Pretty interesting, yeah. But Berwick upon Tweed.
Yeah.
Like what?
What?
But they know what it means, or even if they don't know what it means, it's just how they did things.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. But yeah.
I just say, thank God there'll always be in England.
Yes. But I mean, Brick.
And I'm going to say this honestly, and I mean this. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, former child actor. When they make it, when they become something, when they don't screw up their lives, you don't hear about it.
Right.
But when they screw up their lives, child actor.
Right. But Gordon-Levitt really did. He picked the right roles to get himself into a position of prominence. He found the right directors to work with
Right.
early on, and he got in with Rian Johnson. He's been in, I think, the only Rian Johnson movie he doesn't make an appearance in.
His Last Jedi.
No, he is in Last Jedi.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
He's the guy that turns in Rey and.
Here's the Shuttle Parkers.
Yeah. That's Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's not in. I don't think he's in the Brothers Bloom, and I didn't see him in Knives Out.
Okay. Okay.
But for the most part, he kind of sticks with him, and now he's in Christopher Nolan's stockpile of background actors.
His company.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's like he was a child actor, became a success in his own right. He's not a megastar, but
I wish he was.
It's like if they make it, if they become something, nobody ever mentions that they were a child actor. Like Kurt Russell.
Right.
Nobody ever mentions that Kurt Russell was a child actor.
Well, that's because nobody wants to bring up the computer wore tennis shoes.
I mean, he did all those Disney movies. And he's been working.
Would you want to bring up the computer wore tennis shoes?
Well, think about this. He's been working consistently and constantly
Since
for almost
the
50 years.
Yeah.
For almost 50 years. And he's never been, his popularity has remained stable ever since.
Yeah.
But nobody ever mentions he was a child actor.
No.
Ron Howard's the same way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ron Howard was probably one of the most prominent child actors who ever lived.
Yeah.
And nobody ever mentions he was a child actor.
Right.
But if they screw up, if they screw up, that's
Right.
what you're going to hear.
Right, right. All the kids from the '80s sitcoms that couldn't get a job after and turned to drugs and
Like Johnny Whitaker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he just or Todd Bridges.
or pretty much anybody who was on Silver Spoons or Webster.
I don't know. Ricky Schroeder he did all right.
He stumbled a little bit. He was
Yeah.
he reclaimed his career for
He
like
did.
a hot second and then kind of vanished again.
I still have a hard time calling him Rick Schroeder.
Yeah, because he's Ricky.
Yeah, he's
Um,
almost literally my age,
yeah,
almost exactly,
like down to the day.
almost.
Wow.
And then people have varying ideas about Jodie Foster, but I think Jodie Foster was a great success, personally. But
Hey, she's got 2 Best Actress Oscars. I
Yeah.
mean, there aren't that many people who can say that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she got her 2 Oscars long before like somebody Frances McDormand got her second,
Right.
Or you know something like that. Like, yeah, I would say she's very, very, very talented. But yeah, Brick is what put Rian Johnson on my radar 15 years ago.
Looper's what put him on my radar.
Looper is what put him on a lot of people's radar.
Looper was a very, very difficult film to really wrap your head around because it
Yeah.
wasn't what you were expecting.
I love Looper in how intricate the time travel logic is,
Mhm.
and how it's very hard to parse. Like
Yeah.
it's not like, you know, Back to the Future or something where it's like, oh, don't do this or this will happen. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, and he actually consulted Shane Carruth
Yeah.
on Looper because Shane Carruth made possibly the greatest time travel movie ever called Primer, which is
That movie comes up a lot when people talk about Brick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Primer came out like a year before, and he's friends with
Yeah.
Shane Carruth, and he
And didn't he direct another movie after that? It was kind of in the same vein.
Shane Carruth. He's done like Upstream Color.
Upstream Color, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking of.
Yeah. So, yeah, he uses that. Primer is a difficult film.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it?
I have.
Oof. But
It's really, really hard to get your feet into. You
Because
have
Shane
to be
Carruth-
really committed to it.
Shane Carruth was an engineer.
Yeah.
And he approaches
He writes like
storytelling
one.
like an engineer.
Right.
And he's a beautiful filmmaker. I mean, his films
I liked
are-
Upstream Color a lot more.
A lot of people did.
Yeah.
It was easier to follow, which it wasn't all that easy to follow, but
Yeah.
it was easier than Primer. But yeah, Brick was obviously the first Rian Johnson I saw. I've been a huge fan of his ever since. So when they said, "Oh, he's doing episode 8," I'm like, like the indie world was just like,
I'm just going to say, I think there's
Flabbergasted.
going to come a time, I think in the future there's going to come a time when people are going to appreciate Last Jedi a lot more than they do now. I think
so.
I think there'll come a time when people will look back on it.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing was with Empire Strikes Back.
I don't know.
From what I
Empire
understand,
Strikes Back was the thing with Empire Strikes Back is it was the first sequel, and it was following Star Wars, and it was very different from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew that it was a trilogy.
Right, and
This one has a legacy behind it.
right.
So,
But I was talking more like just public acceptance, and critics loved it, and fans took a long time to come around to Empire.
Empire. Those two films, Empire and Jedi. Most people are either or.
Yeah.
It's like my favorite is Empire, my wife loves Jedi. So
I grew up with Return of the Jedi being my favorite one.
you have a legacy with that. You have a
Because that was the
Yeah.
first movie I saw in the theater. But in the interceding years, I've really
Yeah.
come to kind of more fall for Empire. But,
Empire is a better story.
oh yeah. It has a better look,
Mhm.
better performances. Anyway, so yeah.
Well, that's all I got.
I think that's about what I have. Just check it out. It's well worth all of the
Give it
time
a
you
chance.
give to it.
Give it a chance.
It's kind of a magnificent little masterpiece
Mhm.
that so few people know about. It's kind of a crime.
Yeah, this month we both picked little gems.
Yeah.
You know, last week was I picked The Prize Winner of Defiance, Ohio, and this week you picked Brick.
Both from
If
the
you're
same
stuck-
year.
Look, if you're stuck in the house, check both of these out.
Oh yeah.
Rent them from Netflix. I think they're both on Amazon or something. But check them both out. You know, now's the time to watch something at home. You know,
Right. Well, again, we're recording this during the coronavirus self-isolation,
Yeah.
social distancing. So this is pretty much what most people have to do right now. I apologize if you don't know anything about this, if you're listening to this far off in the future and you're like, what's coronavirus?
forgive us if you're listening to this 10 years from now. We
Right,
always say
yeah.
that.
What's COVID-19?
Yeah.
Is that some sort of compound that they put into soda to make it more sugary? You know.
Or as my mother says, must be something from Star Wars. Yeah, my
Sounds like
favorite
something
was
from Star Trek.
one of my favorite things I ever said to my mother's, "No, mother, tiramisu has nothing to do with Star Wars." God love her.
So, what do we have coming up?
Next week, we are going to talk about one of the greatest films ever made, and probably more prescient now than it ever was then. And a movie that is near and dear to our hearts. We are talking next week about Sidney Lumet's brilliant Network.
Yes.
It is not a satire. It's sheer reportage.
Yeah.
Those are the words of Sidney Lumet himself.
Yes. Excellent film. And then we take a skip into Hitchcock land for a whole month,
Mhm.
and then MCU time.
Then MCU time.
So, yeah, that's pretty much what I got. What we
Okay.
have coming up. So you can catch all of our back episodes at the podbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. Find us on iTunes and YouTube. Type in the handle @pod_bay. Find us on Twitter and Patreon under that handle. We thank you so much for joining us, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
Mothers, I want you to get all of your teenagers together and gather them around the radio. I want to tell you a little story. There was a girl that left a good home to go out on her own. She wanted to see the world, yes, and have a lot of fun. But she didn't know right then, yeah, that she would meet a man called King Henry. Now her mother, she cried and walked right by her side. Said, honey, please don't go. Please don't go, honey. But in her foolish pride, she pushed her mother aside. She said, Mother, I'm old enough to know. Now let me talk to you a little bit. It was at a midnight ramble where she met a man called King Heroin. He whispered in her ear, in smooth tone so low. Now listen to him. In his deadly charm, saying, give me your arm. Let me take you higher than you've ever been before. Let me show you where they went from there. Oh, to New York, and to, yeah, the boardwalk, to the south side of Chicago, and many a southern town. She made California, yeah, and Flagstaff, Arizona. With never a thought of going back home. Now let me talk to you a little bit more. Now the news reached her down in Reno to come on home at once. But home your darling mother is laying there dying. Do you know what, young folk? She couldn't go right there. Ah, yeah. She had to pay a man called King Heroin. One more thing I want to tell you. She left Reno, Nevada, yeah, trying to thumb a ride. No one helped her. They just pushed her aside. But she wasn't through just yet. She had one final debt. Oh, to a man called King Heroin. Now this is about the end of it. Listen. On Route 66, a cold body lies. No one knows her name. Oh yeah. But a note found in her jeans, though tragic it may seem, reads, mommy, I'm coming home.